Well, I can start the reassembly process with the release lever, I think. But first of all, I've got to do something with this spring. That is not the shape that spring is supposed to be. So I'll have to see if I can reshape that slightly. That's closer to it. My hands are covered in the remnants of the adhesive here from getting the Leatherettes on, so it's a bit tricky holding little things like this. I think that'll do. And getting this spring on the arm is never a particularly easy task, even on a good day. Let's see if we can get this to go on there. So to get the hook of it underneath the arm and the coil of it on the around that boss. Needless to say, nothing wants to go. There it is, that's in place. Yeah, it's sitting there pretty well. Okay, we'll start with that. So I'm going to take some molybdenum paste, run it through the body, here and here, where that that shaft's going to run, and here is where that tail on that spring runs against the casting. So I'd run some on there so that it will move up and down freely. So pop that in from the bottom. Be careful not to damage that spring, not catch it on anything. Okay, I'm holding that up with my finger from underneath. I'll put its return spring on the top and see if I can get that screw started. That shaft is split and that provides some tension so that it'll hold an adjustment. Otherwise, if the screw just ran in loosely, it would never hold the adjustment. Okay, so the spring's under tension there. That all looks good. I can get a take-up spool in place, the film spool, the film advance shaft. We want the bush for the base of the film spool, which is a little nickel-plated brass bush. Typically that's lost, well that one, don't think that one ever was nickel, oh it was nickel plated, but it's usually losted on the base, usually it's all scuffed away. And 3 screws that hold the advance shaft into the casting. Now this was the problem as described to me, that this spring was broken. Of course that spring is not broken. The film advance had lost all its tension because somebody had dismantled it from the top. Now I'm going to use some graphite grease here, and I want it down on the shaft, between the shaft and that bush. Because that's where the wear is going to take place. Yeah, that's good. Just making sure that some gets into that, in between the shaft and the bush. and I'll run some into the spring so that the coils of the spring run smoothly over each other. I mean, they usually do anyway, but it can't hurt. Right, so with that out the way, I want to use some synthetic grease. I could use the graphite grease, but it's very dirty to be having to handle. I'll put some synthetic grease around here on these cam surfaces. This is where the release lever runs around the cam surfaces on the film advance shaft. That controls the motion of the film advance lever. Right, so opening the back of the camera, just blow this dust out. Put the film take-up spool in place. And drop the shaft in. Now I want to get my release lever correctly positioned over there. And get my shaft in place. And line up those holes. Why won't they line up? There they are. Okay, there's 3 holes there. Get my screws in place. When you're hunting for the screws, these will be the ones that aren't completely clogged up with adhesive from under the leatherettes. Alright, the 3 screws are in place, I can tighten those down. That's that little part done. Next I want to assemble the clutch that goes on top of the film spool. I'll use graphite grease again. Applying that to the inside of the barrel. So here's our central part. It's got a notch on the top. The spring must, and tag on the spring must engage in that notch. We've got to get this spring to lay there neatly. If I hold this with a pair of crimp lug pliers, I can pull that all into place, keeping that tag in the notch and putting this on there. There's a recess in here and that goes downwards when I'm putting this together. Oops, that didn't quite drop in. Let's do that again. That's the way it's supposed to go. The clutch has controlled slippage and it moves smoother in one direction than the other. That's normal. I'll put some synthetic grease through the centre. Drop that in on top of the take-up spool, rotate it until it engages the notches in the take-up spool. You can see as I roll the take-up spool with my thumb, you can see that turning. This is the upper bush for the film advance. It's got a little two little gears on it here. They're linked on a shaft. I'm just applied a big wodge of grease there, pressed on it with my thumb, which forces the grease in. I give it a wipe through the centre, again with synthetic grease. Pop this on the top, and if I roll the take-up spool with my thumb, it'll make sure that that gear engages with the teeth on the clutch. There's a plain screw on this side, it's a round head screw. On the other side we have a little ratchet pawl, sits up on top of this bush. Now the plain side should be up, the countersunk side should be down. There's the little ratchet pinion. And here's the shoulder screw. I'll just put a touch of grease around the top of that so that the pinion will move freely. The pawl rather will move freely. Get that down, make sure that the little pawl can move freely, and it does. Tighten those two screws up. And I need to fit the return spring for that pawl. Now that return spring acts to push that pawl towards the centre, and it fits round a groove in the head of that screw. And you can see that's spring loaded. That gives us our ratchet action. This gear here needs a little bit of grease on the underside, particularly the outer edge, and through the centre is enough. And if I rotate this counterclockwise, it should push the pawl out of the way and drop into place like that. Usually at this stage I find it handy to take the surround for the tripod socket, just pop it underneath the film advance. It just supports that shaft while I'm working on it so that it doesn't press down while I'm trying to get stuff on top of it. This spring goes on. I've just given that a little wipe of grease, mostly to make sure that it is free from rust as anything else. This piece goes on. This piece. The washer. And then we're going to have this plate. I'm not ready to put that plate on now because it's I haven't got everything else in place. But I'll put the screw in there loosely to hold all this together while I'm working on it. In fact, I might cheat, I might put a gear on there as though it was a retina while I put that screw in. That gear is just a place filler at the moment because it doesn't belong and it won't be staying. But it'll help hold all this together while I do the rest of the assembly. Okay, so that part's good. We're going to need a wind of tension on that before we put this back together. I want to get the sprocket in there, so that's the next thing to worry about. Where's my sprocket? Hiding. Where is it hiding? I laid all these pieces out carefully, now I can't see what I did with them. Okay, here we go. This is it. So let's put the catch. I'm going to put the catch for the rewind button in first. I'm just supporting this on that pair of pliers, as you can see, so that the release lever is not hitting the bench and pushing up and unwinding all the time. So here's the lever. This is the catch that holds the rewind button when you press it in, so that it automatically pops up again when you move the film advance. Otherwise you would have to hold the rewind button through the whole process of winding the film back into the cassette. Now that's not something that's particularly uncommon. There are plenty of cameras where you actually had to do that. But this little catch saves you having to do things like that. So I'll put the spring in place, put the shoulder screw in, going to make sure that the spring doesn't get trapped under the shoulder of the screw, and neither does the lever, that the lever is free to move. Let's tighten that screw up, just check that lever. Seems a little bit tight. No, I think it's okay. I'll lift its spring over and hook it behind that tab. Okay, so that's good. The sprocket shaft goes in. The slot side goes up. Pop that into the body. The shaft, need to put some grease around the top part where it's going to go through the casting, around the bottom part where it's going to go through the casting, and usually I just give a quick wipe to the teeth of the gears. Drop that in from the top. Inevitably you'll have to help line it up with a hole from the bottom with a tip of tweezers or something. Hold that lever back, pop it all up into position. And now I can revolve my spool to bring the hole in line here, so I can put the screw that holds that drives the sprocket from the sprocket shaft. And hopefully that'll go in without any arguments. It doesn't always, or sometimes it leads in better on one side of the shaft than the other, in which case just revolve things 180 degrees and go back and try that. So the rewind button, I just want to put some grease into the spring of this. Put that on the button, put the washer on the button, holding the shaft from the top with my finger, I can screw this into the bottom of that sprocket shaft. Making sure the button will pass through the washer, that it's not trapped on the washer. I can tighten that up with my pliers. And now the sprocket shaft and the film advance shaft are meshed together. Right, the front part of the camera. I've got this here. I've blown all the sand and grit out of that, so that's good to go. This piece, this is, you can think of that as the cocking rack if you like that. This is the piece that meshes with the back of the shutter and cocks it, and it sits in here like that. It's pulled along by this piece, which is connected to the film advance shaft. So I've got to get all this in place in the body. So a bit of grease here is good, because I don't want this thing falling out and annoying me. So I'll put some grease underneath it. and on top, and drop that in place there. There's a baffle goes into the back of the camera here, which I have cleaned. It only goes in one way. There's a notch in here, and here, and they line up with projections in the body, like that. We'll slide this in. Okay. Check that piece is in there, that's okay. That baffle, is that holding me up? Alright, now we had a strip of material which I have reason to believe supported this edge, where that's not supported by the leatherette. No, that didn't happen because that's too long. Where did that go then? It certainly fell out. It's got to go somewhere. It's the right width to go across there. Did it go at the top of the body here? Possibly. Let's put that in there. See what it looks like. That's foreign to me. I'm not used to seeing that. No, that just drops through that slot, so I can't, it certainly doesn't want to stay there. It's got to have been at the front here somewhere. It's too long to go there or there. Perhaps it went at the base. It's a space filler of some sort. It's there to take up space that probably was not as designed. Well, I'm just puzzled. Oh, it certainly went at the top. Looking at that mark there, it went at the top. It was glued to the casting at that point. So that's where it goes. It goes in there. And it is a space filler and no more. I'll glue that into there so that it's not flapping about in the breeze. And then I'll put the front in. Have that strip in place. Now we can put these 4 screws that hold this front section in place. 2 at the base are easy to find because they're always discoloured from corrosion and adhesive. one here. Now this has a round-headed screw. Now I did see this. I didn't find that earlier, but I'm sure it's here, so I'll just track that down. Well, that screw was certainly missing, but I did find one in my spares and put that there, so that'll do that job. Now I might as well put the tripod socket in here, I think, while the going's good. That'll save the back from opening every time I put the camera down on the bench top. So I did notice that there's at least 2 screws are missing, and there were odd screws in here that have come from something else, or one of them has definitely. The other one just looks like a damaged screw. As I get to those ones, I will put some proper replacements in place. Okay, this is starting to look like something. The front section here, we've got the cocking gear that cocks the shutter and the release. I don't know whether it's best to put these in now or when I get that rack all assembled. I might get that rack all assembled at the top first.